Hello, this is Todd Janzen from Janzen Agricultural Law, LLC. Welcome to another 10-minute webcast. Today's webcast is about legal issues for driverless farm equipment. And we're going to take a look at what some of the legal hurdles are that keep us from getting to that level of full autonomy on the farm. So I want to start off with a quick graph here that explains that something we already all know, which is that the number of people working on the farm has dramatically decreased over the last 100 years. And mechanization is really what we have to thank for this, as the advent of the tractor arrived on the farm and the diesel engine replaced the horse. We saw the number of people needed to grow crops and raise livestock dramatically decrease in the United States. And that number really decreased continually until about 1990. And I think that's when we hit that point where productivity continued to increase, but we didn't see the dramatic reductions in the labor force needed to reach those productivity gains like we did earlier in the century. And what's going to continue to push this down, I believe, is as we reach the point where we have more mechanization and robotics on the farm. So where are we today? We know that there are a number of semi-autonomous technologies that have been widely embraced by farmers, such as auto steer, but we haven't reached that level of full autonomy when you can completely pull someone out of the cab and let the machine do its thing. We have seen a few of the large equipment manufacturers debut concepts that are fully autonomous, but these are really just ideas at this point and not commercially available for farmers. I also want to point out that in the startup arena, there has been a lot of money put into robotic technologies and these sort of autonomous things that take farmers out of the cab or off the farm and allow robots to do the same work without people. The Society of Automotive Engineers has developed a chart which explains the different levels of autonomy. And this chart's on the screen now, and you can see there are 6 levels. And I think that with most farm equipment now, we're somewhere between levels 2 and 3. And that means that the machine is able to do most of the work and monitor most of the systems, but you still need a human driver to intervene and do some things that the machine is not capable of doing. We will eventually move up this graph, though, and I think we will get to a point where we have high or full automation in the near future. When you compare autonomous cars to autonomous farm equipment, there are some striking differences. The purpose for an autonomous car is to move a person from point A to point B as efficiently as possible. And it also means that you're always going to have a person in the car at all times. And this is really important because if something goes wrong, the car could alert the person and the person could intervene if necessary. When you're talking about autonomous farm equipment, the whole point is to get the human operator out of the cab so that we don't have to train an operator. We don't have to train somebody to do the certain farming activities that the machine can do by itself. But that also means you're not going to have a person there to intervene if something goes wrong. Most likely that person will be somewhere else and will be monitoring the equipment remotely. So when you're talking about autonomy and autonomous vehicles on the farm, the first thing to ask is, what's the problem we're really trying to solve? I think the obvious answer there would be labor shortages. We just don't have enough people that work on farms anymore to do those jobs that require additional people. Another one would be seasonal demands that go along with those labor shortages. And so there are a lot of jobs on the farm that only have to be done once or twice a year. And so you can't have a full-time employee around just to do that. But there are other things as well, like repetition and the tediousness of doing a job over and over again. And this applies, with specialty crops as well as row crops. And I think as well, autonomy could also address precision and accuracy and make it more efficient to do certain jobs on the farm. So those are really the issues that autonomy can help us solve. So the big legal issues with respect to autonomous farm machinery is liability, of course, and this occurs in a number of places. So liability for farm machinery is different than for cars because you have liability both on the farmstead, over the road, and in the field. And the challenges and obstacles that you face in these different areas are very different. And I feel like Google and Tesla and others, they'll solve a lot of the over-the-road problems. But the on-farm and in-the-field problems are things that agricultural equipment manufacturers and startups will have to resolve, because those challenges are really quite different. Who's going to be liable when one of these autonomous farm equipment machines uh, leaves the field and causes damage, or causes damage on the field? Is the farmer going to be liable, or is the company that sold the equipment going to be liable, or even perhaps the dealer that sold the equipment? We've seen this play out a little bit with respect to Tesla, which has its autopilot feature, which is already available. And there have been some accidents when autopilot was engaged. And so this has resulted in disputes between Tesla and some of its owners with respect to who is responsible for that. Was it the car's fault because of the software or a sensor? Or was it the passenger's fault or the driver's fault for not taking the wheel when they should have? Let's talk about some of the non-legal obstacles for driverless tractors. Well, first of all, we live in a time when people want a greater connection between the food on their plate and the farmers that grow it. And removing the farmer out of the machine seems to me to take this the opposite direction from the current trend. Secondly, the cost benefit. So there has to be a payoff for embracing this technology. And if it only costs, $15 an hour to employ a seasonal worker to do a job that would cost $50,000 for new technology to do, it's going to take a long time to pay that back. Third, there's a risk to a manufacturer to do this, of course, because they may be liable if something goes wrong. And many manufacturers may not want to take on that risk right now. But likewise, there's a risk to farmers because they may be the ones liable if the machine goes haywire and something goes wrong and it causes damage or injury. I also have on here lack of electric drive, because that's one thing that Tesla has pointed out, that electric drive certainly makes autonomy much easier because it's one less thing that has to be managed. And of course, we have things like cyber attacks, which are possible, and ethical concerns, which have been well documented with autonomous cars, when a machine has to make a decision whether to go this way or that way, and either way harm will result. There's an ethical dilemma there that a machine is not really capable of deciding like a human would. What laws apply to driverless farm equipment? Well, in field, there are a number of things that we may have to worry about that we haven't really addressed yet. For example, licensing statutes. Some things that we do on farms require licenses, and a machine may not be able to get a license to do these things unless laws are changed. Product liability laws might apply and determine who would be liable if something goes wrong. Application licenses. In many states, you have to have an applicator's license to do certain tasks on a farm. Could a machine get an applicator's license to apply pesticides, for example? That's an unanswered question. And also environmental laws. In many states, you have to have be approved to apply things like manure on fields in certain areas, and farmers can get those permits, but could a machine be permitted to do that as well? And then, of course, there are on-road laws, which we're all familiar with if you have a driver's license. And I point out as well that the National Highway Transportation Safety Agency also has guidance for bringing autonomous vehicles onto the roads. Those might apply as well. So that's a lot to think about. I hope you enjoyed this 10-minute webcast. Check back in a couple weeks and we'll have another one. Thank you.